The will to live and the will to die. Jim Drake at that time said to me, he said, "Chris, if we don't get out of here by Christmas, we'll both be dead." And that scared the daylights out of me, thinking that there was going to be a termination to all of this, and I didn't like the outcome. Jim Drake died Christmas Day, 1944, and I directly relate that about as his will to die, how powerful that will to die was. My will was a will to live, and because of that, I'm here today.
If you can imagine working so hard for something all your life, and then boom, it's taken away from you. Well, it was like that for this guy. He wanted to be a fighter pilot. It was during World War II, there was an enemy, he was patriotic. That's initially what really attracted me about this story, because the story is about a guy who wanted to become a fighter pilot. He became a fighter pilot, and he was flying, at the time, one of the coolest planes in the sky. It was a derivative of the P-51 Mustang. On his first combat mission, through a weird quirk of bad luck and cruelty, he never even meets the enemy. Instead, he runs out of gas and spends the next 2 years as a prisoner of war. I'd like to introduce you to Chris Morgan of the 311th Fighter Bomber Group, and POW from 1943 to 1945.
I was born in Whitestone, New York. That's Queens County. My father at that time was a policeman in New York City, and my mother was a seamstress. She was the last of 8 children, and she grew up working for her sisters. There's a place called, in New York, Floyd Bennett Field, was a famous airfield like Roosevelt Field and Mitchell Field. All those were out in Long Island. And we used to go, as recreation, we used to go out and watch airplanes, watch them fly. And I can remember there's a plane called the GB Sportster. It was a fantastic airplane. And that was the first love that I had for an airplane, was the GB Sportster. And then the military planes from Mitchell Field. I can still visually see them flying in formation, and
The drone.
yeah, it's unbelievable. But that was an influence that stayed with me, and is still with me. On Pearl Harbor Day, I was with my buddies Dick Clark and Harry O'Neill and Fred Kroll and Clyde Baird. 5 of us were standing out in front of a soda shop in Yonkers we used to call it the Dutchman's. The name of the place was Cars and Schultz. It was but we called it the Dutchman's. And that's where we heard about Pearl Harbor. The 5 of us were standing outside, and somebody came up to us and said, "Did you hear?" And then they told us about Pearl Harbor. So we immediately all wanted to enlist, and everybody selected the Air Corps. We all wanted to be pilots. And fortunately or unfortunately, I was the only one that got through flight school. The others had either physical impairments or something else that precluded them from going through flying school. So I did get through. And I had an English instructor at that time, believe it or not. He was a pilot in the Battle of Britain, and they gave him a cushion job of coming over here and being an instructor to American pilots. Doug Wakefield, his name was. But in any event, we had very good instruction. And then we went to advance. We got back in the Army, and that was, I had an Army first lieutenant. I'd have even forgotten his name. That was my instructor there. So that the entire program had comprised of 200 hours in the air, and that was brought up through the primary, basic, and advanced training. I graduated in March of '43. I went into a single-engine advance at Marianna, Florida here. I was 19 years old. I didn't want to be, the casualty figures coming out of Europe were horrendous. The 8th Air Force was taking a terrible beating over there. They'd send, believe me, 17 airplanes up and one comes back. 10 men on each airplane. Now, that worried me, or it was a challenge to me in the fact that I didn't want to have that responsibility. I didn't want 10 men as to be responsible for the lives of 10 men. So that's why I went into single engine. I had the privilege of electing either single engine or multi-engine. And I selected single engine because of what was happening in Europe. And I thought, well, if I go down, I'm going to just go down myself. I won't be taking 10 guys with me. And that's a big responsibility. No, the people thought a lot of the Air Force. I walked with my father one day after I graduated from flying school, and we were walking in the streets of New York, and a GI came in the opposite direction. He saluted, I saluted back. And my father said, "Is he saluting you?" And I said, "No, Dad, he's saluting the uniform." And so that's the way I felt about it, my position as a second lieutenant.
Did you have any regard of the Japanese? What'd you think of them then? I mean, this is before you took off. What'd you think of Japanese?
They were the enemy, and they were killing Americans, and so our job was to get rid of them as quickly as we could. And we had a good platform to attack the Japanese, that airplane that I was flying. And fortunately, I guess, fortunately, or the way you look at it, but I say fortunately, I didn't have to kill anybody. And that was, I would have been a good, I was a good pilot, and I knew my job, and my job at that time would have been to kill people, and that's something I didn't have to do because of the POW thing. So I can remember going down the runway and waving at my crew chief, "So long, I'll see you." The flight that I was on that went into Burma, it was the first mission of the 311th Group. And General Olds was the flight leader for flight number 1, Red Flight, and Colonel Melton was the flight leader for the second flight. Major Lutz was our flight leader for our flight. So I knew what my target was, and I never got to the target because our flight leader got lost and took 2 other guys with him.
How do you get lost, Chris?
Inexperience is number one. You lack of preparation. I don't think he properly prepared himself for what he had to do. He was a good officer and a good leader, but he was a rotten pilot, and that is what, that failure on his part is what caused me to be in that prison for 2 years. Well, I flew up alongside of him when we were definitely lost, because he was flying in circles and I knew he was lost. I did fly up alongside of him and told him that I could take him home. And he looked at me and he pointed to his collar. He was a major, and he pointed to his collar and told me to get back in formation. And that's what I did. I followed orders. He went down. He ran out of gas and crashed into a sandbar on a river. And Bo and I landed in a rice field. Not that I had picked this. One of the things you learn when you're flying is that you always have a place to land. You're always looking for another spot. And I had a spot in mind. I knew where to go. And so I landed in a rice field. I waited until my tail hit the ground, and then put my hands up in front of me, and I rode it out, that's all. And then it didn't take long, and I was very fortunate that I got through it all right. But the airplane was destroyed. The first night we stayed, I slept with my airplane. And then the second day we decided to try to find our way back. We knew what direction to go, generally, and it involved, well, crossing a river was one of the things we had to do. And we stole a canoe and crossed the river, got across the river with this damn canoe. And the following day we started our march again, and it was, the jungle was very, very thick and heavy. The ground underfoot was unstable. Bo got caught into some quicksand. We had saved our parachute, the lanyard from our parachute. We had saved all that. And when Bo was stuck in the mud, I was able to pull him out with the rope that we had from our parachutes. That was a sad thing. And then we were trying to figure out what the hell to do. We weren't getting anywhere really. And all of a sudden some natives came along, some Burmese natives. And they, one of them had I'll never forget, he had a brass buckle on it. It turned out he was a Burmese Boy Scout. And I thought, well, Jesus, these guys they're Boy Scouts. They're going to take us back to India, you know. And so we hooked up with them. And then they led us into an ambush of the Japanese soldiers. And that was all she wrote, because there's nothing we could do. I can't say that there was any fear. We were just worried about what was next, that's all. What was next? What were they going to do next? And it turned out the soldiers that captured us they were not nice. They didn't like us because our group had been over there strafing them and causing trouble. So that's when I had as bad a time as I had throughout almost the whole experience. They beat us and tied us up. And my hands were they got swollen and very, very painful, very painful.
How do you think
until it stops being painful. That's all. It doesn't hurt anymore. It's just so numb.
How do you think you handled it?
I did pretty good. Bo didn't do too good, but I did.
What's the difference?
Well, he got angry, and he started swearing at them. And they took wood. We had there was a fire there, I remember, and they took a piece of wood out and started whacking him with this burning wood, you know. And so I said, for God's sake, Bo, shut up. And he did, and we survived. That first night was as bad an experience as I've had, I think, and over a long period of time. That was a bad night. And then the next day we got taken to the first English-speaking Japanese that I met, and he wanted to know. He had questions about who my commanding officer was, and where I was from, and all this kind of stuff. And I told him, well, all I have to tell you is my name, rank, and serial number. And with that, they fired a rifle right next to my head and hit me over the head with another rifle. And that got my attention. I thought, well, I'm dead now. But I wasn't. And this Jap said, he said, you must talk. And he took out his sword. And he showed me the sword. And I said, well, I agree with you. I got to talk. We were in solitary confinement, and it was almost 3 months, and it didn't affect us at all about trying to escape or anything. But I think the Japanese always were a little in awe of the American. This pocket is all that remains of my uniform that I was wearing on October 16th, 1943. The rest of the uniform disintegrated. I kept it as long as I could, using the pant legs and shirts and shirt tails for patching. But in any event, this is all that's left of my uniform from October 16th, 1943.
What'd you put in it?
And I used it to put in whatever valuables I had while I was in prison camp. I mean, simple things like a knife and fork, or whatever. But this was, if I had anything of value, it would be kept here. We had a meal one day, and I was looking across the room at a fellow by the name of King. I've forgotten his first name. But in any event, he was sick and couldn't eat his rice, couldn't eat his meal. And I was sitting there, and I finished my rice, and I'm looking over at King, and I said to myself, Jesus, if he doesn't eat his rice, maybe I can get it. And then I reflected, how low can you get to look at another man who can't eat and wish that he couldn't eat because you wanted it to save yourself? So that helped me change my attitude about the POW experience. I became more compassionate and worrisome about other people rather than myself.
So you walk up here, this is a F-51, it's in post-World War II markings because they got the red stripe. But when you're approaching an airplane like this, does your mind go back to your training, or does your mind go back, or is it just so far away you don't remember?
Oh no, I'd like to sit in there, and I wouldn't have any qualms about cranking it up and moving it around.
You said something yesterday. You said you had a regret that you didn't fly after the war.
The opportunity was not there. When I got out of the prison camp, there was little or no guidance in terms of a future in the Air Force or opportunities to get back into squadron work. The war was probably drawing to an end, and we were surplus. Part of my thinking about fighting is when I was at William and Mary, I was walking on a campus street one day, and a fellow almost ran me over, and with that I chased him, and we had some words, and it got to the point where we were going to have a fight. And he said, "I'll fight you, but isn't it stupid? Isn't it stupid?" I put my hands down. I've never raised my hands again. And if you extend that thinking to the war games, it's stupid. War is very stupid for fellows to go out and kill each other. But they do it, and they're still finding better ways to kill each other than they ever had before. And it's terrible. And it's absolutely, the best description I can think of is stupid. And nobody likes to be called stupid. So that's the way I feel about it. Coming home was when I got to the front door and my mother and father came to the door, they collapsed in my arms, both of them. It's unbelievable. And that emotion has, and the memory of that emotion and what happened that night has stayed with me forever. So that was that kind of, the knowledge of that love was out there sustained all of us. I think that I had a picture of my mother and my sister that the Japanese even let me keep, that I explained to them that's my mother, and they knew what I was talking about, and they let me keep the picture. So that was one of the things I had in my little pocket bag. And then after the war, I thought I looked at the catalog from William and Mary, and I saw a picture of Lake Matoka, and there's a boy and a girl in a canoe on Lake Matoka, and I said, that's the place for me. And so I went to William and Mary and wasted 5 years.
How did you waste 5 years?
Yeah, I drank too much. I invented drinking, and so I drank too damn much for 5 years. And then when I got out, when I left school, I went to work and saw how tough it was going to be out there. And I needed help, and I was fortunate enough to meet Connie. And therein lies the best part of my life. Connie was the biggest, powerful, positive influence in my life. And after I met with her and became serious, my life changed in the best possible way. Before we got married, she took a week's vacation with her girlfriend, and she made a decision during that week about whether or not she wanted to marry me or not. And so that she made the decision that she wanted marriage, and that was my good fortune.
If you were to have your last day on Earth and you were going to be having lunch with a random 16-year-old boy or girl and you had to tell them something.
You don't want to go through life angry. You want to go through life in the best possible mental frame that you can conjure up. And I think that if you could give a person an enthusiasm for their life that's been given to them, that you can't do a hell of a lot more than that. Enthusiasm for life. Love one another.
You know, I think there are two powers at play here. The first power is the power that allows a man to just grind through pain and torture and disappointment and deprivation. That's the power of will. It's the only thing that I think can really get an individual up and through the yuck. But what about when the yuck goes away and you're home and it's peace and it's safety and everything is as it should be? It was the second power that got Chris away from the bar and got Chris back focused on success and becoming the person who he was meant to be. And by the way, he did achieve success. I mean, success in business. He became a successful father. What is that power? Well, I got a glimpse of it when I was talking with Chris, and I asked him about the secret of his life, and he said, you know, John, the past 3 years have been harder than any Japanese prison camp. And I said, well, you know, why is that? He said, well, 3 years ago, my wife died. And I got it. It was his wife, Connie, who got him out of the bar. It was wife Connie who gave him the confidence and courage. It was his wife Connie who helped him become a strong father. That second power is not the power of human will. It's the power of human love. Now, how's that for a war story? Was it love at first sight?
Oh, I don't know whether that's a good expression or not. Connie is no longer here, but I love her more. So it's not love happens over the years, and it's something that you earn and respect. Our marriage, as I've said to you, it got better and better over the years. It didn't deteriorate, and that's because we loved each other.